Not at all. Not in the narrative.
But Lauren, what we want to talk about first, I want to get into species appropriate diet. Lauren, take the floor.
All right. So, every species on the planet has their specific diet that is appropriate to their needs. So, when we're looking at what's the appropriate diet for us to be eating, we want to look at the same factors that we would look at for any other species on the planet. So, we're told that we are a omnivore species, but our anatomy and physiology do not match that. So then we have to look at what does our anatomy and physiology tell us? What is it? What are we built for? So one of the things that when you're looking at a species specific diet is what can you eat raw based on only the faculties that you have available in your body, right? So a lion can take down an antelope because it's built to be meat eating species. It's got fangs, it's got claws, it's got the ability to puncture through the skull of the animal. It's got all of the faculties required in order to eat meat. Now, we don't have any of those faculties. So we have to look at, well, what do our faculties offer us? So we have incisor teeth, which are perfect for breaking through the thin skin of an apple. We have a sense of smell that is delighted by fresh fruits. We have eyesight that sees in color so that we can see the red of the apple in the green of the trees, whereas carnivores and omnivore species, they have more like gray color palette. Like they don't have the same vivid ability to see colors that we have. So when we're looking at the species specific diet, we're looking at all of the things that we can eat in their raw state, in their whole state, without using tools or weapons and without requiring cooking. So naturally, that's going to be fruits, tender, sweet leafy greens, tender vegetables, small amounts of nuts and seeds. And so that is our primary diet. That's we are a frugivore species. And so that's, those are the foods that we're supposed to be eating.
Yes, and it just makes so much sense, like you said. One of the analogies I use is like you put us in a room with a pig or whatever, with no weapons. I mean, we can't do anything, and we can't bite through their skin. We can't devour them. We can't eat through bone. All those different things. It just
Yeah.
makes so much sense.
Yeah,
When
one
you
of the things I always say with my dogs, we feed our dogs a raw species appropriate diet, but dogs are an omnivore species. They're not carnivores. A lot of people call them carnivores, but they're actually omnivores. They eat fruit and they eat meat. But when they eat meat, they eat the whole thing. They eat the bones. They eat the feathers and fur and all of that. And if you have a dog and you feed the dog meat without bones, you can kill that dog. So, we know, yeah. If you feed a dog only on meat with no bones, their life, they get sick and they die. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you feed them only bones with just little scraps of meat, they actually live really long, healthy lives. So, it just goes to show like how important it is for that bone material to be, any sort of animal that's eating flesh has to consume that bone because the bone is where they get the alkaline minerals that balance the acidity of the meat. So yeah.
So the dogs and the bones, right?
Mhm.
So is that a cooked bone or is that a raw bone?
Raw. Yeah.
Raw.
Yeah. Then,
Cooked
and
bones
that's the,
are detrimental to their health, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And that's another thing that we need to be thinking about is like, if we're only eating meat when we can cook it, then, we're creating a toxic substance. So like for a dog, dogs with a raw bone, they can chew it and eat it and dissolve it and digest it completely. And it comes out like as just a powder on the other end. But a cooked bone will not digest at all. And often you see with dogs that get into like, cooked chicken bones or something like that. And then they end up with like a perforation or something like that. And they have to go to the emergency room because their body can't digest it. Because once we cook that bone, it's completely indigestible.
Oh,
Wow.
I did not know that. I mean, I know that cooked bones are unhealthy for dogs.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were not digestible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then the bones can like split, and they can
Yeah, because
hurt in that part.
cook bones are softer, so they
Yeah.
can split easily in their
Yeah,
stomach.
yeah, for sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
when they get cooked, they break off into shards and they have like sharp edges and stuff like that.
Wow, wow. Everybody listening on or watching on or both shit, on Twitch, feel free to chime in. We are going to do a Q&A with Lauren as well. So if you have any questions throughout this episode, post them in the chat, and we will definitely ask those questions. But continuing on with, the physiology, our diet, what it's supposed to be. We've all been conditioned, in many different ways when it comes to eating food. And I think one of the biggest things is the whole macronutrient fallacy. So speak on that. What are the main four? Is it protein, carbs, fat, and what's the fourth one? I thought there was a fourth one.
No, it's just three is the primary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Maybe
macros. I mean, there's your micros, your vitamins and minerals.
Right.
Yeah, so obviously protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Our species specific diet is very low in fat, very low in protein. One of the things that we look at when we're looking at how much protein do we need, how much fat do we need. Protein is a building block, so we need the most protein in the first year of life. So when we look at what is the mother's breast milk providing for the child in the first year of life, we look at that, the ratios, the protein is very low. It's between 2% and it goes down to, I believe it's about 1.4 or 1.2% by the time they're 18 months. So if we have the highest protein needs between birth and about, say, 18 months when we're growing the most rapidly, we definitely don't need these crazy amounts of protein that we're eating as adults. The average person is eating between 30 and 60% protein a day. And our system is just not designed for that. And the thing is, people think, that we've had this huge protein myth, and there's a couple plant-based doctors out there now that talk about how it's like the deadliest myth that we've ever foisted on the population, because everybody thinks that you need protein at every meal, so people are eating animal proteins 3 meals a day, and that's something that is kind of unprecedented before. It was, people may have eaten meat, like our grandparents' generation may have eaten meat maybe 1 meal a day, not always even 1 meal a day. Like I know my grandparents growing up in the war, they they had fish on Friday because they were Christian, and they were Catholic, I should say. And then maybe like one other day a week, and then the rest of the week they were eating vegetables that they were growing in their own garden and stuff like that. So we've moved from we took a little bit of bad information, and then we've just taken it to the extreme where we're and now we're like promoting these high protein diets like keto and carnivore, and
that's the big one now,
South Beach and paleo, and and it's funny because keto and carnivore is getting really big. It's starting to get onto all the mainstream, which is just so crazy.
It is.
But it's when you look at the history, you can go back to the 70s, and they had the caveman diet and the Atkins diet. Then you had the South Beach diet, and basically once the death toll gets so high, then they remarket it as like a new like a new brand name, basically.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, so like the caveman diet was basically what carnivore is today.
Right.
It had enough bad press. I mean, you look at the Atkins diet. Most people know that Atkins diet causes heart attacks and just overall mortality rates. We now have the studies on keto that I believe it's like 54% increase in mortality if you start with any sort of kidney issues, and 25% overall increase in mortality rates on just 1 year on the keto diet. So when in the train model, we understand why this is, our physiology is built to run in certain ways. It's built to utilize certain things, and it's built to not utilize in as large of amounts certain things. So, every cell in our body runs on sugar. We require sugar for energy. So what we need, our largest need, is sugar. That's where we get our energy to run the day, to run every cellular process throughout the day. So we've as a society kind of demonized sugar because we're not eating real sugar like
Mm-hmm.
fruit sugar. We're eating refined
Refined.
white sugar, corn syrup, and
Yep.
all of these like really super toxic things. Um, but truly, that's what our body needs. It needs that sugar, and that's why a lot of people, if you have a protein heavy meal, you go for the ice cream and cookies afterwards, right? Because your body it's got all this protein that it has to digest, and it's got to do something with it. It's like begging you for energy. So that's why you have those cakes and cookies and pies and everything, because you're starving your body of that sugar, and then the body's going to want to binge on sugar. And because you've taught your body that it can get sugar from all these refined sources, that's where your natural cravings are going to go to. But if instead you're fueling your body with fruit all day, those cravings for the ice cream and the cookies and the cakes and stuff just go away, because you're no longer starving your body of sugar.
So I have a quick question, just for clarity a little bit. So when you're speaking of sugar, you're not speaking about refined sugar. You're speaking about the sugars that we get from fruits and vegetables. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so, we do need to delineate between that, because,
Right.
our body will use, fruit sugar just as much as it'll use corn syrup or white sugar. But the corn syrup and the white sugar are devoid of everything else that is in a whole food. So all the vitamins and the minerals and the alkalinity and the water content and the
Mm-hmm.
fiber, all of those things that are required. So, can we technically run off of just pure white sugar? Yeah, for a little while, but we're going to start stripping the alkaline minerals out of our bones and our teeth. We're going to end up with osteoporosis, and we're going to have we can end up with an aneurysm because the structure of our veins break down.
Damn.
We can end up with bad skin because the structure of our skin is a lot of alkaline minerals is what gives the tissue strength. Our muscles will break down over time.
And
Um,
this is um, caused by prolonged usage of refined sugar.
right, yeah, because you're providing your body with the energy, but you're not providing it with anything else. So, what we on our natural species specific diet, we're providing it with the sugar that it needs to run the cells, but we're also providing it with the alkaline minerals. We're providing it with trace amounts of protein. We're providing it with trace amounts of fat. All fruits contain all of the essential fatty acids. They contain all of the amino acids that the body requires. And speaking of amino acids, I think that's another thing where people get hung up on, like, oh, I need protein. One of the things most people don't realize is that we actually don't have any use for protein. What we actually
Wow.
require is the amino acids. And our tissues are not chicken tissues, right? So our body doesn't like just take in a piece of chicken breast and turn it into something usable. It actually has to break that all down. It's going to expel a lot of it because you're going to be eating it cooked. So most of the proteins have been denatured and damaged. So it's going to be maybe a very small portion of it's going to be usable material. The rest of it's just going to go out with waste. So the body's got to put a lot of energy into expelling that as waste and getting rid of all of that. Whereas if we provide the body with the amino acids it needs, then the body, it has the building blocks for protein that are already just ready to go. They're in the right form for the body to use them immediately. They don't have to be processed in any way. They don't have to be digested in any way. They can just be put right into use to build cells and tissues and everything that we need.
I have one more question, just about sugars before we kind of get off sugars. Um, I've heard from athletes that are in training and they say things like, well, I can't eat an orange because there's too much sugar in the orange. Now, is there any validity of fruits and vegetables having too much sugar in them to be
No,
detrimental to our body?
no.
Oh, that's good. That's a
Yeah.
great answer.
Yeah. And that's, it's funny because, I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and he was saying that he he tried the keto diet, and he was like a bodybuilder, and he tried the keto diet, and he dropped like 20 pounds of muscle, And he didn't understand why. He was like, well, I'm eating all this protein, and why is my body not, turning into muscle? But that's not how the muscles are built. Muscles are built by use, and in order to use them, we need energy. So the core thing that we need when we're building muscle is actually sugar. We need that fruit sugar in order to provide the muscles with energy in order to build and add add mass and stuff like that. So I say to people, like, I eat exclusively fruits, leafy greens, small amounts of nuts and seeds, and tender vegetables, things like that. And I'm 104 pounds, and I can easily lift 80 to 90 pounds. I can, I carry banana boxes around, 40-pound cases all the time. It's not about the protein that you're eating. It's about the energy that you're providing to those muscles. That's what gives you the strength.
That's good stuff right there.
And that's what I said. The macronutrient fallacy is kind of what controls pretty much everybody on which diet they follow, on what they eat. Because I can't tell you how many people I tell about going towards a terrain model and the fact that we're actually frugivores and fruitarians, and whatnot. And the first thing they say is, well, where do you get your protein? Where do you get your protein? I need more protein. I get a headache if I don't get enough protein.
Yeah.
That's we've been completely indoctrinated, though.
Oh yeah.
Well, and that's a great point, though. Like, if you don't keep putting in the toxins, your body's going to start cleaning. So why do these people get headaches when they, don't keep feeding themselves? It's just like if you're stepping down off any drug, you're going to start going through detox symptoms.
Yep.
So, you're kicking off that headache, not because you need the protein, but because your body is so toxic from all of that excess protein that the second that you give your body even the slightest little leeway, even the slightest little lift of burden, it's going to try to clean and clean and clean. And that's why you see, people who start doing the intermittent fasting with keto, and, they get the keto flu and stuff like that, because it's like you're just so overwhelming your body. And then as soon as you fast and you give your body that little bit of break, the body's gonna just start trying to clean itself out.
Shit. Yep.
Yeah, it's got to clean it all out.
And look, the way I look at all of this, because at the end of the day, it's like you're fed so much stuff from so many different places. The best experiment you can do, besides reading, what Harvard EDU has to say or what NIH has to say or Google, you know what I'm saying? Do the experiment on yourself. Like, I kicked coffee a year ago. And when I kicked coffee, I went through like 6 or 7 days of severe inflammation in my joints.
I remember that.
Like, I've never felt anything like that before. I've never experienced anything like that. And it was a direct correlation. Like, I mean, it's direct causation, kick coffee, go through that. But after that week, I was good to go. Have, once in a while I'll have the smell of coffee. I'll be like, oh, that smells good. But never thought about drinking it again, and completely kicked it and don't need it. You know what I'm saying? I don't need coffee. I eat, fruits and, leafy greens, and I have enough energy. So, like, that's what I tell everybody out there when you're hearing this, like, and you talk about this a lot too, Lauren. In fact, I think you put a post about this recently. You don't have to, don't think you got to go 100% into it. Like, ease into it, slow yourself, give your body, some grace, and maybe start with one meal a day and then kind of work your way up from there. And it'll be a much easier transition than trying to go just 100%, into the terrain model.
Yeah. I always tell people, small changes repeated daily, is how you're going to create those habits. And, for some people it works. Some people can just have the personality where they can just like flip a switch and just like, I'm going 100% on this. Right. That's not me. I'm not that kind of person. So it took me years. So, I very slowly progressed. And, one of the things that I did was I just started, I tried to go 100%, and it just mentally my situation was just not working for me.
Right.
So then I said, you know what, like, I'm not going to be so hard on myself. I'm just going to say every day I'm going to have some fruit in the morning. Nice. And like my first meal of the day was fruit. And I was like, I'm not going to worry about anything else. I'm just going to do fruit in the morning. And until that kind of becomes just a habit, right? It just becomes like to the point where you're like, you have to have that fruit in the morning. It's become your routine. And then, once I got to that point, then I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to add a salad. And then, so I started doing a salad for lunch, and then I was still doing like a cooked meal at night. And then I started kind of adjusting my cooked meals to things that were like a little bit less harmful, going no oil, no salt, going with more like steamed vegetables and things like that. And then eventually just kept eating more fruit and more fruit. And then, there just hit a point where I no longer desired the cooked food because I'd have so much energy eating the fruit all day. And then I'd have this like cooked meal at night. And then I would just like feel like a slug. And I was like, you know what? I want to go out and do like a million things. So I don't want to feel like a slug all the time. I want to have just abundant
Right.
energy all the time.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
When I kick meat, like I went like vegetarian for like almost 6 months, and I'm a big time meat eater. We're in Texas. That's what we do. We eat
Some more indoctrination for you.
goo gobs amount of red meat and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
But once I kicked it, I can tell my energy levels, and now I'm back on meat and things, and it's kind of harder to kick now this time, But once I kicked it, I had to go 100% cold turkey because I had to make up in my mind, especially being a chef, private personal chef. I'm around meat all the time, and I'm around this and that all the time. But I would taste it, but I wouldn't consume it, so I would spit it out. And for me, I really kind of had to do it cold turkey that way, or I would have eating a cheeseburger here, eating a hot dog here.
Yeah.
So I just had to cut it out completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
some people do. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I find that like over the years as I was kind of transitioning, and then I would have like long periods where I would be, just 100% raw. And then, somebody would be like, oh, let's go out to dinner, whatever. We go out to a plant-based restaurant or something. And then for like weeks afterwards, I would just be struggling with the cravings, and especially the salt. Like, just salt is just so addictive. And I think kind of as a generally as a society, we have a lot of adrenal issues because we are drinking coffee and stimulating ourselves, and have these like high stress, high activity lifestyles and stuff like that. And so that the salt is it's an adrenal stimulant, so it damages our adrenal glands, but in the time that you're eating it, it gives you a little bit of a boost of energy. So that energy is like a false energy. It's a toxic energy. But, and so like at the end of it, it's kind of like drinking a cup of coffee. Like when you have a cup of coffee, you're not like creating energy. Your body is ramping up its energy in order to expel the coffee. So, you're actually draining your body's energy, even though it seems like you have more energy, like you're pumped up. Same thing with salt is that, the body sees it as a toxin. So when it goes in, the body ramps up and stimulates. And then what ends up happening is you end up being even more tired afterwards because you're draining that energy off. But it's, in the moment when you're feeling tired and you still have to make it through the rest of the day, that you get that salt craving, and then, you have the salt and you get that high, and then, you can kind of make it through the rest of the day. So it's a tough one to kick.
For sure. For me, like, just kind of going off of what you were saying about going vegetarian for 6 months or whatnot, from the last time we talked, Lauren, till now, like I was probably at 40% of what I should have been doing, and I'm probably at 80% now. Just in that span of time. But like when I do stray off the path, like my body tells me immediately, like immediately. And it's to the point now where it's like, you just don't want to feel like that anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
And people, everybody in, the way society is, everybody wants to look a certain way. Everybody wants to lose weight. And I'm just a testament to the diet. Like in the past month, I've lost 14 pounds. Like just by, getting to that point. My wife, she lost, 10 to 15 pounds somewhere along there. And the weight just starts coming off because you don't have all that excess stuff. And then the energy is, you just have so much more energy because you're not putting as much burden on your body.
Yeah.
And speak on that burden, because that to me is the most important part of it. Like understanding the burden and what that truly means, because people have the misconception of being full and why they get into a food coma and don't understand why that's happening. But go ahead and speak on that for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And before I do, I just want to kind of touch on what you were saying before about like, one of the things I think that, most people are used to like changing their diet and restricting and not eating a lot. And, one of the things about eating our species specific diet is you can stuff your face. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
like people like are always amazed by how much I eat. Like, I'll sit and I'll eat, 10 or 15 bananas in one go. So it's not about like, starving yourself or,
Right.
It's about like being full, eat till you're full. And, I always say to people is like, when you look at the diets and you look at kind of like your typical person who is dieting and is overweight versus your typical person who is skinny, the skinny person is the one that's eating all day long, or they're eating, not even eating all day long, but, they're eating when they're hungry. They're not, holding back. They're not like trying to restrict their calories or skip meals or, just deprive themselves. Like, eating our natural diet is just about eating until you're full and satisfied.
Right.
And it's a different kind of full also.
Yes.
It's not it's not the sluggish.
Right.
I want to go to sleep. I don't want to do shit. It's full with energy. And I notice it doesn't. The feeling of fullness does not stick around as long as it does when you're eating meat or heavy starches and things of that. The traditional kind of diet, so to speak.
Yeah. And, and that comes down to digestion times. So like, your typical piece of meat can take anywhere from 8 to 18 hours to exit.
Jeez.
So, all of that time, your digestive system is running. So, if you think about your body as like a battery, right? And you're just draining the battery. Every time the digestive system is running, you're draining the battery. Every time you go for a run, you're draining the battery down. Every time you sleep, you're refilling the battery.
Simple.
Yeah. So if you're eating something that's taking 18 hours of the digestive system just running and running and running, you're just draining down that battery. Fruit takes a watermelon takes about 30 minutes. You average like apples, pears, bananas take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to digest. So all of that extra time, your body's able to clean itself. It's able to, just do normal repair processes, run the cells normally. And so that's, kind of touching on that burden that, it's really about, what does the body have to work? What does the body have to do in order to digest that food? So, part of it is the digestion time. The other part is what is it doing during all that time? So, like we were saying before, we need amino acids. Fruit contains all of the amino acids. They're easily broken down. They're actually already in their usable form, so they don't even have to be broken down. Right. Versus, if we put in a piece of meat, that has to be broken down, and then most of that product is going to be waste product. So there's a energy being drained on the expulsion of that unusable material. Then there's the conversion of that material into something that's usable. That's an even larger drain on the body. And then oftentimes when we're eating these types of foods, they're devoid of fiber and they're devoid of water. So we're dehydrating our body, which number one, if we're dehydrated, our energy is not going to be as efficient. So, the body requires water to operate all of its cells. Anytime we have
like a battery.
Yeah, like a battery. So, if we don't have that water, and we don't have appropriate amount of water, like if you have a battery that's running low on water and you add more water, it's going to start working better. It's not much different. Yeah. So, dehydration, and then when we dehydrate our body, our waste system is going to be backed up and not moving as appropriately. And then when that happens, our waste system is our lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is, I like to think of it as like tiny little tubes filled with maple syrup, right? That's when it's like operating normally. But if you dehydrate that and then now you have like peanut butter running through your lymph system, think about how much slower everything's going to be eliminating. Stuff's going to get stuck and clogged up. And then that's where we end up with chronic diseases. We end up with the waste backing up around the cells. And then if there's waste backed up around the cell can't operate as it needs to. So if a cell is not operating at peak efficiency, you're going to be, if just in terms of energy, if your cell isn't able to operate at peak efficiency, you're not going to be as efficient in everything that it's doing. But, in terms of, just normal cellular function, if your cell is just backed up with waste around it, it's not going to be able to operate properly. So, if we get to a certain state, we might see something like diabetes, where the pancreas isn't operating properly. Well, why is it not operating properly? Because the cells are surrounded with waste and they're not able to do the job that they're designed to do. So we got to get all that waste out of there in order for the cells to start operating properly again. And that's why we see, when people switch from a meat-based diet to just even a cooked plant-based diet, that,
right.
To type 2 diabetes is rapidly eliminated because, you're just able to get some of that waste out from around the cells.
Get rid of the sludge.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this, it's simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look at all these different diets and all these studies and all this information that comes out that just confuses everyone, because this one says I should eat this much meat, this one says I shouldn't, but I could eat processed or Beyond Burgers and shit, and this one says I can't eat any sugar, this one says I can only eat these types of carbs, blah 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 blah. People just get confused and they don't know what to do. But this is simple because it's right there. It's your body. It's simple. It's energy efficiency. Avoid the taxing, and the burden on the body, and avoid the toxicity. Like, you do those things, you live by those 3 staples, and you're going to be good to go. You know what I'm saying? And keeping it simple. And obviously, I personally think they make it complex by design. Yes. Because they don't want you to understand the power that your body has itself, because that doesn't fit the narrative. That doesn't, placate to the systems that are put in place that make millions and billions of dollars every day.
It's like the medical industry has all of their own terminology, right? So if you go talk to a doctor, they're gonna throw out their legal terminology, their there's like a specific word for it.
Jargon.
Yeah, they're like medical jargon.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is literally their bread and butter. That's how they make money. Because if you don't believe that you have to go to them for health, then their business model crumbles. Right?
Facts. Yep.
So if you start to realize that health is 100% in your control, then you're no longer a paying customer for that system. And so, they have to make it seem like, you're not smart enough, and it's not even the medical industry. Like we've actually got an entire propaganda system through Hollywood films and television.
Absolutely.
How many times have you seen a TV show like ER? Like all the doctors are always heroes. It's always
right.
And we're even seeing it like with the last 2 years, the hospitals, and they'll have big banners out front like heroes work here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've been indoctrinated into, just doctors knows best. You don't know anything about your own body. Don't trust your own body. Your body's not self-healing. Your body has to be poisoned back to health.
Right.
And that is the central tenet to the medical industry is, a dose of poison, like the word pharmaceutical literally means poison. The pharmakia was the sorcerer or poison maker. So, we've like kind of lost sight of the forest for the trees, and we get into the the medical office, and I was reading a study the other day that or I don't know if it's a study, but like a survey, and the average person spends about 15 seconds, I think, talking with their physician, with their primary care doctor. That's like, how are you getting anything useful from that interaction?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
because they look at them like they're an authority figure.
Yeah,
Okay,
the trust.
tell me what I need, and then I'll
Right.
go ahead and
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah,
Without
like-
asking. And then sometimes you ask questions, and sometimes some doctors, not all, but some doctors get offended by that. Well, look, I'm telling you what to do.
Yeah.
I'm the doctor.
Right. The
Yeah.
authority.
Yeah, I've heard it from a few people where they, wanted to ask questions about what's in this, drug, what's in this injection, how does it work, what is it,
Right.
and I used to, before I even knew about the terrain model, I used to drive my vet completely insane because I wouldn't just, she was used to people just accepting whatever treatment, and I was just like asking a million questions. I'm like, well, what does this do? Why do we do this? Like, one of my foster dogs, and actually what kind of prompted me learning about all of this was that I took in a dog that was having seizures. And so they were like, well, somebody else was fostering him and they couldn't handle it. So I said I would take the dog. And they had started him on the phenobarbital, which is like kind of your standard medical treatment for seizures. And that wasn't working. He was still having a lot of seizures. And so then, we took him into the vet, and she was like, okay, well, I want to put him on, Keppra, and I want to put him on, I forget the other name of there's like a third one. And within like the first 24 hours, he was stumbling around drunk. Like he couldn't make it through the doggy door. He could barely walk. And so I went back to the vet the next day. I'm like, well, what is in this and what's going on? And tell me how this works.
Right.
And that was like, she very offensive to her. Like, she was like, what do you mean? Like, why are you asking questions? Just, take the treatment. And I was like, well, this is no quality of life. This isn't, what we're like, this is not what we're going for here.
Right.
There's got to be a better option. And so, one of the things that she said to me is like, well, the seizure medication, it raises the seizure threshold. So it's basically a muscle relaxant that makes it so that the body cannot seize. Wow. So all you're doing with that medication is hiding what's actually going on. Everything that's going on in the system with the seizure is still happening. You're just hiding it, and it's just like, it's almost like it just makes us feel better. Like, oh, we don't have to see our dog seizing,
Right.
We haven't fixed the problem. We haven't
Exactly.
removed the cause, but, here we are, we're going to, just hide it. And that's acceptable. And that is the standard treatment. And so I was like, well, we're not going to do that. So we took him off of that, and, we put him on the species specific diet, and his seizures lifted very quickly. But unfortunately, he already had like a lot of health issues, and he didn't live that long. But we did but then I ended up getting a second dog with seizures, and because of everything that I learned from Casper, I was able to put it in place for this dog. Actually, this Bean was his name. He had dementia, he was blind, he was deaf, and he had seizures. And we were able to get all of it reversed.
Wow.
And he used to run around and do like little banana dances. Like if you held a banana up, he would like spin and dance and stuff like that. But it was like, thanks to, asking those questions and saying like, everything that I learned from Casper, I was able to kind of, carry forward onto the next dog. And, just, that was really what kind of just spurred on this entire, learning about this entire subject matter.
Right. For sure. For sure. Everybody out there on Twitch, we appreciate you checking us out here, Minds Like Minds podcast. Look, if you have not had a chance to check out Akasha Flicks yet, you're going to find more content like this, free thinking, truth seeking, spiritual content, honestly, just high vibrational stuff to help you learn, grow. If you go to www.akashaflix.com, subscriptions are $9.99 a month. We have new videos every Friday, including, like I said, Minds Like Minds podcast, our other show, The Lounge, Chef Definition, as a cooking show on there. just a plethora of content, an ever-growing library of conscious content. So if you like shows like this and information like that, make sure you go and subscribe. We're going to kind of transition from diet to dis-ease. All right, but before we do that, I got a few things I want to obviously we can get super deep into these, but a couple points are kind of questions in a way, but explain why it's not good for our body to eat cooked food.
Mm-hmm.
Oh shit. Okay, wait a minute.
So,
And everybody out there on Twitch, we want to see some comments here. What are you guys thinking of the show so far? Anything for Lauren? Please post. Unless my chat room is frozen, I have not seen anybody post, but I know there's a lot of people in here. So go ahead, Lauren.
yeah, so there's a couple of reasons that cooked foods are not good. Putting fire to anything, whether it's your hand or a piece of food, is gonna change the content of it's gonna burn it. So depending on the level of heat, we create chemicals called acrylamide and other carcinogenic chemicals that are toxic to the body. But really the biggest problem with cooked food is, well, I should say there's two big problems with cooked food. One is you're cooking something that would never be a suitable food in the first place, right? So if you can't eat it raw, if it doesn't taste good raw, like think about a potato, right? You're not really going to want to eat a raw potato. It doesn't taste good.
My wife does sometimes, but she's
sweet potato, raw sweet potato, but yeah, it's and maybe some of the little purple potatoes and stuff that are actually sweet. But your standard kind of Idaho potato, you want to russet, exactly. You want to cook it because that breaks the starches into sugars and makes it more like a fruit. So every time we're cooking things, we're actually taking something that's not suitable and breaking it down into a sugar to trick the body into thinking it's getting fruit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
So then the other thing that is kind of probably the biggest contributing factor is hydration. So, our natural foods are highly water rich. They contain fiber and they contain water. And those are the two biggest things that we actually need. We get all of our hydration from our food. So, we can drink water, but that's really just hydrating our bowels. It's not hydrating the body intracellularly. So we need that water. And when we cook food, as soon as the moment that you start cooking it, you're releasing water from it. So you're already taking something that is may even already be starting out with less water than we ideally need. And then you're cooking it down and you're taking off, anywhere 30%, 50% of the water content. And so now you've got this dehydrated sludge going through your system that's going to suck water out of your body. And the body is going to actually take water from the cells and flood it into the digestive tract so that it can push it through so it doesn't get stuck in the digestive tract. So, when we're eating raw fruits, we're getting 100% of that water content. And, I believe it's about 80% water is what we need to digest a food without having to drink any water. So your average banana is about 75% water. Your watermelon is about 90% water. So we want to be eating a lot of those watery fruits that help to, rehydrate the body, especially if we've been eating a lot of cooked foods. The watery leafy greens like iceberg lettuce, romaine lettuce, things like that are really water rich are going to help, rehydrate the body. And, I don't know if you guys have seen, but they talk a lot about the average human has about 25 pounds of compacted fecal matter in their digestive tract.
I've heard that often.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's all stuck in there because it's all just dry. The body doesn't have the level of hydration it requires to get it moving out of there. So, we develop those little pooch bellies, because that's
where right up in that area.
Yeah.
It's where that bullshit is stored.
Yeah. And you see, when you see people your bodybuilder, like Joe Rogan, right?
Right.
He's got that, he's got a 6-pack or whatever. but his gut, he's got what they call it, like bubble gut. He's got like like it almost looks like he's pregnant.
Yeah.
And it's just because he's got all that putrefying meat just hanging out in his gut, and it's
Oh, he
just
loves him some meat too.
yeah,
That's all he talks about.
Yeah.
Grilling
yeah.
this, grilling that. Yeah, man, I saw something on Instagram today about somebody grilling a damn watermelon. I'm like, really? You gonna ruin one of
I
saw
nature's
that too.
amazing fruits
Yeah,
and grilling
seriously.
it? You saw that?
Yeah, I saw that too. I also saw some people putting mustard on watermelon.
What?
Yeah, that's what I
Ruining
said.
just
That's
amazing, just one
yeah.
of the most amazing
I've
fruits.
seen somebody did like a watermelon roast where they like peeled it and then they like grilled it and like put it. It looked like a meat roast. I
Right,
was like,
right.
what?
I saw that too.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
It's trying
It's
to get,
just
yeah, it's too much. Okay, real quick before we we're gonna take a quick little break, like maybe 5 minutes. We've been on for an hour here after all the craziness, and then we're gonna switch to disease. Real quick, can you thrive on only fruits, or do you have to have the leafy green vegetables with it?
we need those leafy greens.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the mineral content. We can overdo it on sugar.
Okay.
If we're eating just fruits all the time, we can definitely like our body only needs so much, and our needs are excuse me, our needs are constantly changing based on our activity level, right? So somebody who's working at a desk all day does not need as much sugar as somebody who's going out and riding 20 miles on their bike.
Right.
So your specific needs as far as sugar are gonna they're gonna adjust based on your activity level. They're gonna be like kind of specific to you, your activity level, how well you're absorbing. Because after years and years of eating cooked foods, our digestive tract is not working as well as it can be, and it's coated. Like we were just talking about all that old waste in there. All that old waste is coating the walls, is making it so you're not absorbing things. So a lot of times when people first start, they need more fruit, and then as you get cleaner and cleaner, you end up eating actually less, even though you have more energy and you're getting more done.
Right.
But the general rule is you should be eating about equal volumes of fruits and leafy greens. So if you're eating like 2 meals a day, you'd be eating like 3 or 4 pounds of fruit and then 3 or 4 pounds salad.
Okay, so that's going to transition right into my next one, and the reason I'm asking this is because this is something that I've dealt with. I'm on the computer pretty much all day. I do a light workout in the morning, but as far as like heavy activity, that's not going on in my life. So I'm not, especially with transitioning and being at where I am at about 80%. I don't eat a lot. Like I'm just not. That like I wake up, I usually don't eat till almost noon. I'm trying to stay within 12 and 8,
Yep.
to eat. And I might have half a watermelon and I'm good for a little bit. Then I still do smoothies. I know smoothies aren't great, but I'll do a smoothie or something.
Yeah.
And, or I'll do, an apple and an orange or like a fruit bowl or something. But that's pretty much it. And then I'll eat something for dinner. That's where that other 20% comes in that I'm working on. But as far as though. like I see some of the, you talked about eating 15 bananas and this much, this amount of fruit. Are calories individual specific?
Yeah. I mean, so calories are just kind of we have like these general kind of guidelines that they're thrown out by the kind of mainstream of, 1,500 calories for women, 2,000 for men.
Right.
And it's just like, if you think about it rationally, you're like, well, the woman who's running a marathon every day needs way more calories than the man who is, sitting at a desk and, laying in bed or like watching TV all day. It's just
right.
So how do we just have like these blanketed, amounts that we just throw out there? But, that's the difference, I think, between the terrain model and the medical model. Is like in the terrain model, everything's very like logical and simple, and in the medical model, everything's like illogical, and so you need a lot of like explanations and fancy terminology in order to get it,
so
to
basically
make sense.
Listen to your body.
Yeah, listen to your body.
Okay.
I mean, if you're
Gotcha.
hungry, eat. If you're finding that you don't have enough energy to make it through the day, eat a little bit more fruit earlier in the day.
Right.
If you're looking for like a little bit more dense energy, go for some more bananas or some more, maybe have a few dates to, give you a little bit more energy or something like that. And if you find that like after you have your evening meal, if you're still craving those sugars, like if you're looking for ice cream or something like that after that, just make sure that you're increasing your sugar earlier in the day. Eat those fruits earlier in the day. And
Nice.
I think just to touch on the two things that you mentioned, the smoothies and the 12 to 8. So the reason that we try to strive for that 12 to 8 window is our body has 3 specific digestive cycles. From 12 to 8 is digestion. So our body is in the mode to digest food. From 8 p.m. until 4 a.m., the body is in assimilation mode. So that means it's taking everything that you've taken in the day, absorbing all of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients and putting them to use. And then the final stage from 4 a.m. to noon is elimination. So your body is preparing substances to be eliminated and, using the clean out cycle. So if we eat early in the morning, if we break our fast first thing in the morning, then we actually are interrupting that elimination cycle, which then creates a little bit more burden on the body. And it's not a huge deal. If you're transitioning, and you still need to eat in the morning, that's fine. But, when we're talking about ideals, that 12 to 8 is the ideal eating window. And the more that we can do that, the more time the body has to clean itself out in the morning, and the better your digestion is going to be throughout the day, the more that you're going to get assimilated out of the food, and the more that you're going to get, the more you're going to just kind of make use of that food.
So that's why most people poop in the morning, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And then
Lauren
the other
dropped the
thing,
facts.
yeah.
Go ahead.
The other thing was just the smoothies. So again, minor things. If you're transitioning and smoothies work for you. I did smoothies for a long time. I still have them on occasion. There's two issues with smoothies. Is one, you want to make sure that you're not combining too many different things, because your body can only digest certain foods well together. So, there's food combining charts people can look up. If they want to come over to like the terrain group, we've got food combining charts that they can look at. But, mixing different fruits, some of them digest better together, others don't. It's, again, a minor issue. It's, you might have a little bit of, gas or indigestion or something like that.
Right.
Not, you're not talking about like it creating cancer or anything like that. Don't freak out about it. But
no. And I got my food combining chart on our refrigerator, so I make sure that I don't put no bananas with my acid foods, and I think that's right. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and melons, only eat the melons by themselves. Yeah, dope. What was I gonna say? The last one, and you may not even have heard this, but if you try to, let's say, search anything about fruitarians or the frugivore lifestyle, you don't get much. And one of the main things you get is about Ashton Kutcher and Steve Jobs. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So I wanted to just for fun, kind of see what your interpretation of that was.
Yeah. So, there's a couple things. So we got obviously Steve Jobs, and then, so Steve Jobs, they say that he was a fruitarian. He wasn't. He, for a very short period of time, he did a little bit of, fruitarianism. Like he was kind of on and off of it throughout his, kind of his final years.
Right.
But he ate fish. He took chemotherapy for his cancer. So, it's like you can't put poison into the body and then be like, oh no, it's the fruit that killed him.
It's the fruit, yeah.
Like, it's just ridiculous. And then the same thing with Ashton Kutcher is, basically he went from eating, a really toxic diet, your kind of standard cooked food, meat eating diet, to 100% fruits. And you never know what people are actually doing. Most of the time, these people, fruitarian, most people are just, they're eating like nothing but watermelon for weeks, and they think that they're doing fruitarian, or they think they're doing the frugivore diet or the natural diet. It's like, no, that's not, that's not what we're doing. That's not natural or normal. I mean, yeah, you might, eat seasonally. So you might, have a really good batch of watermelon and eat a bunch of watermelon for a couple of weeks, but you're not just eating fruits. You want to make sure that you're eating those leafy greens, that, you're, if you desire them, that you're, getting the nuts and seeds, the tender vegetables,
Is
things like
spinach
that.
a good leafy green?
Yeah, spinach is a good. You want to go with like the on those dark leafy greens. You want to go with the baby versions because they
Baby
do
spinach.
have, yeah. So like baby spinach, baby kale. The larger ones, they have a little bit more of the kind of bitter chemicals. So anytime a green starts to get bitter, that's when we want to like kind of back off of it. So the tender, like collard, same with collard greens. If you eat the collard greens that are really big, they're going to be more bitter than the ones that are small.
Okay.
So yeah, anything like, we have our senses, um, smell, taste, touch, to guide us. And so, anything that's sour, anything that's salty, anything that's bitter, um, like if it makes you cringe, if it makes you have like a kind of an uncomfortable reaction, that's your body telling you that it's not a suitable food for you. Right. So we
Right.
see like, onions make us cry. Garlic, if you eat raw garlic, it's going to burn your mouth. If you put like, just a piece of garlic on your tongue, that's going to burn. So we have these senses that are designed to tell us what should be going in, what isn't, or what shouldn't. So like, spicy peppers, same thing. Like if it creates discomfort in your body, that's because it's harming your body.
Right. Right. And once again, very simple.
Yep.
Right. Not complex. You know what I'm saying? I mean, using your senses. We got a couple people have chimed in, that I'm gonna get to, and then we'll wrap up this part of the show. Please explain the melon. I brought up the melon as far as food combining, and that's one of the fruits that, according to the food combining, you're not supposed to combine with other fruits at the same time. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so melon digests really quickly. And because it's really high sugar content, really high water content, not a whole lot of much else, it can ferment if you mix it with things that are going to move slowly. So when we eat something, your body starts, as soon as it enters your stomach, your body starts releasing digestive enzymes, in order to break down that specific thing. And we have different digestive enzymes for proteins versus carbohydrates versus fats. So when we put a food into our stomach, the body's going to release the appropriate enzymes for that specific food. So if we put in a mixture of different foods, then the body is going to not know what to put in. It's going to put like, some of this one and some of that one. And sometimes they can counteract each other and then kind of neutralize each other. So, if they do, then you end up just not digesting at all. And then the food's just kind of sitting there. And then it comes through, it's going to start to ferment because as soon as any fruit is in the system, it's going to start to, as soon as any fruit is cut, it starts to decompose. So same thing with, animal tissues. If you eat animal tissues, as soon as the animal is killed, those tissues start to putrefy. So if we're eating them and then, we're not digesting them, eliminating them fast enough, we're going to have all that putrefaction within our system. Same thing with watermelon. If we're eating a watermelon that's meant to go through our system in like 30 minutes, and then we mix it with a, banana that takes 3 hours or something.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
You're gonna have, one thing that's digesting very slowly and the other thing's just fermenting and creating gas and all of that. So
Interesting. Okay.
So-
and go ahead.
So during like when these vegetables or whatever have you are fermenting in our system, right? Are there any telltale signs or like the putrid meat that's hanging around for like I think beef is something like 2 or 3 weeks in your system just rotting? Are there any telltale signs that you have that going on in your system other than the bubble gut or where it's hanging out? I mean, fatigue, of course, but like fermenting fruit, is there any other telltale signs that you have some fermenting fruit in your system?
well, yeah, if you're fermenting, you're usually gonna have like gas or bloating. So, you'll be burping, or you'll have just like, your belly will get a little distended, stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the thing is, just always, if you always think about like in terms of speed of digestion, if you're gonna eat something that's going to be slower digesting, eat it late at night, or not
Right.
late at night, but like eat it, for your dinner meal, so that your body has the whole night to work that out. If you're going to eat something, like watermelon, eat it first meal of the day, and then anything slower digesting can go in, shortly after that. But general rule is eat melons alone or leave them alone, is like the saying.
Eat them alone, or I like
Yeah,
it.
eat them alone or leave them alone, because if you're going to mix them with other stuff, you're going to end up with gas and bloating, which I think a lot of people say. I think food combining is the reason why a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't eat fruit." A lot of people think that they
Yep.
can't digest fruit, or there's this new, fructose intolerance is like the new medical label, for people who get gas because they miscombine. It's like, no, that it's not the fruit. It's everything that you ate before you ate the fruit that is still very sluggishly moving through the system, and your fruit is running into that. So if you're going to eat, another thing you can do is, like, if you're still eating cooked food, surround it with a salad. The extra fiber from the salad will help kind of push
Help
it
break
out
it
more
down.
quickly.
Nice.
Yeah, help move it through more, especially like, if you're eating meat, combine that with greens, combine that with like leafy greens, because that's going to help the body push that through, because meat doesn't have any fiber in our digestive tract. It's a muscle. It needs something to grip onto. So if we're not eating fiber, it doesn't have the bulk that is required for it to move through the system. So if you're going to be eating those like less ideal foods, try to combine them with some leafy greens to help you keep moving them through, and help provide some more hydration and stuff like that.